How are you? Look, I don't know how you got down here, but I've never been one to question Providence. My name is Danny, and I'm here to teach you about an interesting family of video games. A bloodline connected by gameplay, rather than narrative. A line of spiritual successors that grew from the golden age of PC software into games that would rewrite the rules for console first-person experiences. This is the history of the Shock franchise. Now, would you kindly sit back and relax? I reckon this won't take any longer than 10 minutes.
Looking Glass Studios are among the most influential game developers in first-person design, a super studio that created some of the most loved PC games of the 90s and fostered talents that would go on to create classics of their very own, developers like Harvey Smith, Randy Smith, Warren Spector, and the eventual caretaker of the franchise, Ken Levine. They released their second game, System Shock, in 1994. You play as a nameless hacker who awakes on Citadel Station after a 6-month coma to find a malevolent AI has taken over operations. So sort of like 28 Days Later, except instead of Cillian Murphy running around and beating 7 shades out of zombie English people, you run around a space station solving puzzles and beating 7 shades out of zombie space people. I mean, I guess you could pretend they're all English.
I know I bloody do.
800 years of foreign rule, never forget! System Shock melds action role-playing mechanics with survival horror to create a terrifying maze of tense exploration, while the sentient hyper-optimized data access network, or Shodan, is the malevolent AI who you battle to defeat throughout both System Shock games. You explore the station, collecting information from terminals, audio logs, survivors, and by hacking into cyberspace. All the while fighting combat robots, cyborgs, and mutants with a variety of tools and weapons. This all sounds pretty commonplace now, to be honest, but this was 1994. Most other first-person games were run-and-gun demon shooters or Nazi dog-murdering simulators. System Shock, like Ultima Underworld before it, melded shooting and role-playing mechanics together. It only sold around 170,000 units, and Looking Glass eventually lost money on it, but it became a cult hit in PC circles.
A lot of talented creators collaborated to create System Shock, but it's hard to weave this tale without mentioning one gentleman in particular.
PC gamer and aspiring screenwriter Ken Levine joined Looking Glass in 1995, where he worked on the fiction and design of the incredible Thief, the Dark Project. But once his work on the game was done, he left the studio in 1997 with Jonathan Shea and Robert Fermier to found a new studio, Irrational Games. Their first game would be a co-development gig with Looking Glass on a sequel to System Shock.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
Released in 1999 and set 42 years after the original game, System Shock 2 takes place on a different space station where your somewhat customized character awakes from post-operation amnesia to find a malevolent AI has taken over the station. Also herds of psychotic monkeys. Oh god! Go away! Ugh! Kid, you stupid psychic monkey! Oh god damn it! Sorry I killed your mate. Sorry, how many of you are there? How many of you are there? Ah, no, I'm freaked out as well. You're a tiny monkey man. Oh, for the love of... It plays similarly to the first game, but graphically it's a lot sharper. The environments look more realistic, there's improved lighting, character models, and the interface is a lot less confusing. The interesting thing about playing System Shock 2, though, is actually how familiar it feels, even if you've never played it before. So many of its mechanics, ideas, and concepts went on to inspire countless other first-person role-playing games. The inventory management, skill trees, and interface is very similar to that of Warren Spector's next game, Deus Ex. Shodan is essentially GLaDOS version 1. There's body modification, hackable turrets and security cameras, repairable and modifiable weapons, loads of stuff. And I don't think you're even allowed to make a game today without it having collectible audio logs. System Shock 2 was a huge game, but once again it proved to be a financial disappointment, at least to publisher EA, and Looking Glass Studios shut down after the game's release.
If the thought of delving into classics from a bygone era doesn't rattle your cage too much, you can pick up System Shock 2 on goodoldgames.com for about 10 of your American dollars. You might as well, because you're probably not getting a sequel.
You see, Warren Spector had negotiated a deal with EA in which Looking Glass kept the rights, but EA retained the trademark, and to make another System Shock, any given party would require both. Rumours started to spread that EA were working on a secret System Shock 3, but when Looking Glass shut down, their ownership of the rights were transferred to a Michigan-based insurance company, Meadowbrook. They still own the rights today, and they're still up for sale. However, in 2007, EA's hold on the trademark expired, leaving them in absolutely no position to release anything with the System Shock name on the box. And a year later, they released Dead Space. There are plenty of rumours about what was actually going on behind the scenes during that time, but as it happens, Shock fans were going to get their sequel after all. Ken Levine's Irrational Games had started work on a spiritual successor to System Shock 2 around 2001, but it went through dozens of major changes before it became the Bioshock we know today. Originally, the plot revolved around a psychological deprogrammer, but by the time the project was made public in 2004, it was now taking place in an uncovered Nazi laboratory where genetically enhanced creatures had formed a natural hierarchy. Screenshots of this project were circulated. I remember spotting them in a copy of PC Gamer around 2004. Sounds a bit too much like Wolfenstein to me, so thankfully the final Bioshock would differ greatly from this template, at least on a surface level. The idea of genetically enhanced beings creating an artificial ecology can be seen in the creation of the Little Sisters, Big Daddies and Splicers. Bioshock is a first-person shooter with RPG elements set in a dystopian underwater metropolis in the 1960s. The sole survivor of a mid-ocean plane crash, you emerge at the foot of a mysterious lighthouse, and thus your adventure into the underwater city of Rapture begins. You begin your time in Rapture uncovering the mysteries of this once great society, fighting groups of splicers, attacking big daddies, saving little sisters, murdering little sisters, injecting yourself with plasmids, using your powers and weapons with the environments to aid you in battle, hacking turrets, hacking cameras, hacking those awesome helicopter things, firing flames, firing wind, firing bees.
Bees!
Upgrading your weapons, following commands, listening to audio tapes, trusting the wrong people. Bioshock is one of the most unique games ever created. A world we'd never seen, populated by people and ideas we'd never encountered in games before. Aryan Rand's philosophy on objectivism, our willingness as game players to blindly follow orders, concepts of morality, the role of government, player agency or lack thereof, and the incredible destructive power of hand bees.
No, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes! My eyes! Ah! Ah!
We'll see who brings in more honey.
While System Shock 2 refined the first-person role-playing genre, Bioshock was the game that pulled it into the 21st century. Today, practically every shooter or action game has RPG elements core to the experience. Bioshock was instrumental in making this change. Some fans think Bioshock put too much of an emphasis on shooting and the RPG elements suffered as a result. It's a fair point, but the combat was so improved from the older games that it was much more enjoyable. Well, except for the boss fight at the end, which was pretty atrocious.
A sequel to Bioshock came out in 2010, but Irrational Games had nothing to do with it. They were already working on some other yoke. Something about flying cities and interdimensional travel, I don't know.
Bioshock 2, created by 2K Marin, takes place in 1968, 8 years after the events of the first Bioshock. You take control of Delta, an experimental big daddy. There are big sisters, and a forgettable tacked-on multiplayer mode, but the problem with Bioshock 2 was that it was a sequel that was obviously made for commercial reasons, and it's just kind of hard justifying its existence. Rapture was the star of the first game, and your slow exploration into its depths was what defined the atmosphere and pacing of the first game. In Bioshock 2, Rapture is no longer a mystery, and so the feeling of dread and wonderment that drove the first game is completely lost. You understand the politics, the ecology, and the players. So Bioshock 2 feels more like revisiting an old friend rather than a brand new experience. If you're a diehard fan of the lore, it adds its own narrative layers, many of which are quite interesting, but overall it feels more like Bioshock Plus than a true sequel.
And now we turn to the future, Bioshock Infinite. Another enthralling world to explore and one that'll question your thoughts on religion and government. So enjoy it, folks. As you've seen from this episode, these types of games don't come around very often. Experiences like this are to be relished, savoured. Just do us a favour, would you kindly not post spoilers all over the internet, please?